Hey guys, this episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast is presented by our brand new Sports Spectrum Increase 52-week devotional, inspiring stories of faith from the world of pro sports. This devotional, this book, is available now at Amazon and at theincrease.com. That's the website, theincrease.com. And I'm telling you, it's a great resource. It's a great gift idea. It's a great devotional to go through with your family, with your coaching staff, with your team, once a week, inspiring stories from athletes and other people in the world of sports who were interviewed and featured here on Sports Spectrum. And now we put this in a book form, and I know it's going to encourage you. I love this devotional. I hope you'll consider getting yourself a copy. Again, the 52-week Increase devotional, available at Amazon and at theincrease.com.
This is Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
And welcome everyone to Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano. We got a great guest today. This is a modern day Rudy story. Have you seen the movie Rudy? Came out, I think, in like 1993. And Sean Astin was in it from The Goonies, and he's been in a lot of other things since then. The Lord of the Rings, big time actor. He played this character, Rudy Rudiger, who was basically obsessed with walking on and being a part of the Notre Dame football team. And that movie has always been this sort of classic underdog film that people show when you're trying to beat the odds and chase after your dreams. And it's such a fun movie, such a great movie. I love Rudy, a great football movie. Well, today's guest, Chris Caulk, is kind of similar to Rudy when you think about his story, except he's a lot younger. He's a guy who's in his early 20s still, mid-20s, and this is a kid who grew up a USC football fan. I mean, he dressed up as Matt Leinart for Halloween when he was a little kid, but goes to junior college. Jesus enters the picture for him. 3 times he's rejected by USC to even be accepted there, much less play on the football team. And somehow, some way, he gets accepted, and he fulfills his dream to walk on, make the football team, and get to dress in a USC football jersey and full uniform and be a part of USC's team. There's such a neat thing about hearing a story like this when you know it's a kid who just became obsessed in many ways with fulfilling his dream to play at USC. Now, the cool thing is God is a big part of this for him, especially more recently as he grows in his faith. So this is a fun story, a very inspirational story. His name is Chris Caulk, and he played football at USC as a walk-on, and he's got a great story. He's going to share it right now on Sports Spectrum. Chris Caulk, welcome to Sports Spectrum. How are you, buddy?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Absolutely. Great to have you here on the show. Let's start by just learning about your background, Chris. Growing up, I read that you were basically born a Trojan, a USC Trojan, kind of right out of the womb. Tell me about growing up as a kid and what life was like.
So you're definitely right about that. As far as I can remember, I've been a USC nut. I would always dress up as Matt Leinart for Halloween. And for those who don't know who Matt Leinart is, he was 03-04 quarterback with that nasty team with Reggie and Lendale and Dwayne Jarrett, Steve Smith, and that he was the quarterback for that team. And as far as I can remember, there's a picture of myself and my dad when I was no more than like 6 months old. He was reading me the LA Times sports page, and it was right after USC had beaten somebody in the Rose Bowl or beaten UCLA. It was right around that time. So it does run very, very deep. I will say that.
That's amazing. So tell me about when you were little. I was thinking about this. Have you ever watched the movie Rudy? Did you watch that when you were a kid?
You know, it's like it's fun. I laugh because everyone says a lot. My story is very similar, like to a Rudy type story, but I've never seen the movie. I've never seen the movie Rudy. Which is the funny part.
All right. Well, either that makes me feel really old, or I just got to tell you, Chris, you got to go watch it. Because It's a story about a kid. It's played by Sean Austin. It's a true story. You probably know it. Kind of undersized kid who basically didn't even have like a journey of football, but he was dead set on playing football for Notre Dame. And by golly, he forced his way on the team thinking he was never going to play a game. And he went through, practiced, and he got his one chance at the end of his last year there at Notre Dame to play. And now he's gone on and been this inspirational speaker. And, you know, when his movie was made and Sean Astin played the role, that kind of brought it to, you know, a public display of being able to see and hear his story. But then since then, he's kind of gone on and shared it. I ask, obviously, like you mentioned, because your story has a little bit of Rudy to it, I think. If that wasn't your movie, what was your favorite movie growing up? Were you a sports guy? Like, did you have sports movies that you loved, or was it more something else?
I think, I mean, every kid, especially baseball players that I was up mostly when I was a kid. I mean, my favorite movie back in the day was definitely The Sandlot.
Yeah,
you gotta love that. And the Beast and Benny the Jet. Like those characters were great, and I love the whole plot of it. I mean, those were great. I mean, my favorite movie now is The Social Network, but back then it was definitely The Sandlot.
All right, so take me through high school here as this journey progresses, and you're getting a little older, and you know, thinking about where does USC come into play, about the idea of wanting to play there. Take me through your kind of mindset in high school.
So I would say that my football journey doesn't begin until mid-March of my junior year, which was 2015. So prior to that, it was always, I knew I wanted to go to USC the entire time. Like I never had any thoughts about going anywhere else. Sure, you think about like, oh, maybe I'll go and play at this school for baseball or that school for baseball. But even when I would think those thoughts, for some reason, I was like, I don't know if it was God telling me like, you can't, USC is going to be your place, or it was just me couldn't get off the idea that I'd been wanted to go to USC for the longest time. But it was always SC. But I was playing baseball up until my junior year, and that was when I would inevitably get cut and this whole football journey would begin. But it was always focused on SC and going to that direction. And I was willing to do just about anything to do it, to get there too. But nothing became tangible as far as real progress towards USC until I'd say junior college. But my thought process was definitely there, and it laid the framework for where I inevitably wanted to go.
So did you play football in high school, like junior, senior year? Are you playing football at this point?
Yeah, I played football my senior year of high school, and I tore my ACL in my first game.
Oh.
So it was a little bit of a rough go for the first part of it, and it was like my door had closed before it opened. So I kind of had that feeling of, okay, maybe the window's shut. Maybe this just wasn't the right way to go. But at the same time, you know, it's never supposed to be easy.
First game of your senior year. So
that was my first year playing football too. I mean, first year playing real football.
So the idea that you would eventually end up on USC's football team, you have to be thinking like, I mean, that's just a pipe dream, right? Like that's not even in your thought process when you're a senior in high school, or is it?
It's nuts, isn't it? It's nuts, huh?
Right. Well, like, where's your mindset though? Are you just like, all right, this sucks and I got to kind of rehab, or, you know, and we want to get to your faith journey in a second, but are you able to kind of push through and think, okay, God, you know, I'm still going to accomplish something amazing and you're going to help me through it.
Sure. I mean, my faith at that point is pretty back pocket. I mean, I think part of the cool part about my faith journey is that I found it in a really low time. And at the same time, I saw God move and I saw the valleys and hills, so to speak. But as far as high school is going, like, I really didn't put two and two together as far as football goes until after I tore my meniscus in my senior night game. Because after that point, I was thinking to myself, there's just no way I can be done. Like, I still have room to go. I can still play. And my brother came up to me after the game, and my brother's funny. He sorry, I didn't mean to laugh like that, but he came up to me. He always says he'll take credit for me playing at SC to a certain degree, because he came up to me after the game and said, Chris, you can't be done playing ball. You look too good out there. And I thought to myself, I felt really good out there. So we'll keep going down this road. And obviously, it was very, very surface level and trivial as far as my commitment was concerned at that point. But it was definitely the steps. I do look back on that, and it was almost one of the first steps to playing at SC.
Interesting. So where does faith, or really when does Jesus enter the picture for you in your story?
Sure. I mean, I would say a lot of Christians, especially today, have that kind of, are either baptized when they're really, really young and they don't really know Jesus, or they go to Christian or Catholic school. And I did go to Catholic school. I wasn't Catholic at all, but a lot of my friends went to Catholic school, and the Catholic high school that was in our town was the one where all the sports and athletes were. So I think that's what kind of set us down that path more so than the aspect of really learning faith up at that point. So, I mean, I learned a lot about church and that kind of stuff, and never really learned about Jesus. I don't know if that's just because I joined the club too late as far as going to like Catholic elementary or Catholic middle school goes. I mean, I joined in 7th grade. Maybe that's taught at a very early age, but as far as I had my experience, I definitely didn't learn that much about Jesus or his relationship with you, which is of utmost importance, like at least as far as somebody who's new in the faith would want to know. But it really didn't take off until a lot of struggles kind of hit me. I mean, I don't know how many people know this. I mean, I've been pretty overt about talking about it, but I've got denied by USC 3 times and went to 3 junior colleges. So it was in that time of getting all that denial and rejection and all the ancillary things that are, associated with junior college, a lot of like loneliness. I mean, there's not a lot of people around you. You're kind of just all by yourself. I mean, you've got your family, but then once you introduce God into your life, there's one day, a lot of other things like family stuff was going on. And my dad's study Bible was sitting on his desk. And my dad is getting into the faith more so now, but at that point, I don't really think he was into it as much. But he had made a movie with the pastor, and my dad's a director for a little context. He was sitting, and he had that Bible for a pretty long time. So, and for some reason, it was just sitting on this big glass desk in our living room. And we're about to move out of this place, and everything's kind of all around the place. And I'm just sitting there looking at this Bible. I'm like, well, okay, one day I'm going to read that. And it's just the way that the sun hit it. It was a leather Bible. The pages were gold. Like, okay, one day I'm going to read that whole thing. And it took me about a few weeks. But then there was one day the movers were coming in, and I was moving stuff out. And you know what? Today is the day. So I grabbed the Bible. I picked it up. And I didn't know where to look.
Where did you start?
After going, I was thinking to myself, all right, obviously could start at the beginning. I could start at Genesis 1, in the beginning God created, but there's something telling me it's like, okay, maybe I should learn about this Jesus character. There's a lot of stuff to learn. I really partially, like I did skip, like kind of look through the Old Testament, like, damn, there's a lot of stuff here. Yeah. But at the same time, I thought to myself, okay, maybe I should learn about this Jesus character. I know about him, but I really don't know a lot. So I'm like, okay, where does Jesus' story start? So, I mean, I started pretty much from ground zero after having gone to school for all this time to learn about it. You learn about the church and stuff, but you don't really learn about Jesus.
Yeah.
But so I Google, where does Jesus' story start? So and from then on, I went to the first book of Matthew, and from then on, I haven't gone more than a day and a half without reading the Bible. So I read it every single day, but that's kind of how my journey started.
Wow. That's such a good story. You mentioned it, you kind of glossed over it, but it's probably a big part of this. You got rejected 3 times by USC. So is that just applying to get into to the college and you got rejected? Or is that like a rejection of playing sports there?
It depends on what type of walk-on you are, but most walk-ons will probably be they'll probably want to have some assurance before going there, but I knew that SC was my spot. So I knew that I wanted to go there so badly that I wasn't going to stop. I mean, I don't know how many rejections they say before, like, all right, dude, you can't apply anymore. But I'd imagine it's somewhere greater than or equal to 3. So, but yeah, I did get rejected by USC academically 3 times. And my grades were good out of junior college. I mean, my grades in high school were fine too. Like,
yeah,
it just wasn't the time. Like sometimes God will say no, but it's not no. It's just, okay, be patient, wait. and watch me move. Because had I gotten accepted to USC out of high school or even out of my first year of junior college, there's no way, zero shot that kid is playing at USC. Like, there's just no shot. And it's tough to see in the middle. And I remember driving in my dad's car back when in San Diego, like probably right around my first year of junior college, and thinking to myself, why on earth am I not accepted to SC yet? Like, I just don't get it. Like, and my faith had started at that point too, though. So I was like, God, what's going on? And that's just me being immature in my faith. But at that certain point, like, I do give myself grace to think like, okay, I knew what I knew at that point, and I didn't see the bigger picture, because there's no way that kid was playing at USC. I had a lot of growing up to do. I had a lot of physical maturity to like accomplish as well, and as well as like athletic maturity too. So all glory to God for that.
Interesting. I'm thinking about, getting rejected. And I tell people a lot of times rejections or no's from God are just, sometimes they're just not right now from God, as opposed to no, or I got something better for you, which clearly he had something better for you. Take me to the moment when you find out that you are going to USC, because that's 3 rejections. And at that point you're kind of like, all right, I'm done. This ain't going to happen. Or maybe you're not. Maybe you're like, I'm just going to keep doing this until I get a clear, you can't do this anymore type of message. But eventually it leads you to USC.
It was probably more so the latter. Well, because I had applied to, my college counselor, I'm not going to try to throw anybody under the bus, but they said, Chris, I would get realistic about my USC expectations. And that was talking about academically as well as football. So had I listened to that person, and I listened to all those kind of people, this story, and you and I wouldn't be talking right now. So it was probably, I just wasn't going to take no for an answer, because I was so sure that USC was my spot. But at the same time, taking that moment of actually getting accepted to USC, it was awesome, and I was so grateful and praise God for it. But at the same time, I still knew I had work to do. I knew I hadn't gotten into the gates of SC yet. I hadn't gotten onto the football team yet, which was, great. Granted, like going to SC is great, and I think it's awesome, but I still had another goal to accomplish. Yeah. That was football, and I hadn't gotten that yet. So I was happy and I was stoked, but it almost set a little bit more nerves into play, because there's a big part of that goal that was still missing.
But you get there. You have your Rudy story. You get to USC. Be honest. Did you ever honestly think at one point that this couldn't happen? Playing football for the Trojans, was there moments where you were like, no, this can't happen? Or was that something that God was implanting in your mind the entire time, that you were like, that's somewhere along the line, this is going to take place? Like, tell me about your mindset and that moment when you're able to find out that you're playing football there. You're not just accepted there, that there's an opportunity here for you to walk on.
Sure. So what I will say is I never had a doubt in my mind that I would get to and play football at USC. I never had a doubt in my mind, not even for a little bit. Are there darker moments than others? Abso-freaking-lutely. Always. There always are. But at the same point, like, the pervasive kind of storyline of me going to SC and playing there, I had no doubt in my mind. But leading up to that point of where I did get brought on, the opportunity would present itself. It was kind of this begging, borrowing, stealing to find somebody who knew somebody through another degree of separation in the football program at SC, because I was sure your listeners, as well as you probably know, it's not very easy to get in touch with those kind of people, let alone all the emails that they receive or phone calls that they receive or whatever, Yes. SC for a reason. But and it's also very humbling in that point. Like, you're trying to get in, but it's like, oh yeah, so is everybody else, kid. But so the way that it inevitably happened is that my dad had a friend who was tight with some guys in Orange County who was tight with a big time football coach down there at a big high school. So, one of the schools that pipelines kids to SC, one of the big Orange County powerhouses.
Yeah.
So he reached out to that head coach of the high school and he said, "Hey, I've got a friend's kid who is really interested in wants to walk on. What would he do? Is there any way you can help him?" He said, "So here's what I'm going to do. I'll get you a number of a guy in player personnel, like a phone number. And other than that, there's nothing I can do for you because like, no matter what, SC is going to have to evaluate it himself." And then when I heard that, I'm like, that's awesome. Because the entire time in this whole journey, I said, all I need is a shot. That's the whole thing that I said this entire journey. And anybody in my family can attest to that. My mom, my dad, my brother. I've lived with all three of them at different points. But
yeah,
they can attest to that. So I texted one of the guys into the guy's number in player personnel, and it was kind of a back and forth for a sec. Like about a few days, I called him. Then I told him, hey, his name was Alex or Eric, one of the two, and I said, or they're two guys, but text him, "Hey, I'm going to be on campus for orientation," and God made it that way because I just gotten accepted to SC, did the orientation on the right day, and he happened to be in town, which was great. So I went to orientation after that, and I texted him. I go, "Hey, I'm on campus for orientation. I'd love to meet up." And he said, "Okay, come by." So I'm sitting in I'm sitting in the bathroom of the communication building, just repping out push-ups. I'm trying to get look a lot more stacked and everything like that. So I go and meet with them, and he says, "Okay, Chris, I want to give you a shot, but it's gonna be in the springtime." And that's when they have all the typical walk-ons come out, and it's they have the kids, they have the open tryout and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, all right, if that's my shot, then that's fine. I don't care. But about a week later, I get a text from the head of the player personnel, and he goes, "Hey, Chris, you're still interested in walking on, right?" I'm like, "Of course I'm still interested in walking on. I'm planning on doing it in the spring, but what are your thoughts?" And he goes, "Okay, get all this stuff done for me." And all the stuff was done, like, okay, a physical, I needed to get some paperwork done. And he's like, "All right, turn it into me on Friday." So the week goes by, I get all my stuff done. I'm kind of just moving through the week, and I hand all my stuff to Eric on Friday, and he texts me, he goes, "Okay, Chris, don't leave the city." I'm sitting there like, okay, what does that mean? Don't leave the city. He's like, I'm like, am I trying out today? He's like, "Okay, maybe." And he texts me about 30 minutes later, and he goes, "We're ready to rock. You're trying out today at 5:30 after practice."
Wow.
So I'm like, at that point, I was, all right, let's go. Of course, I'm nervous. I'm like, damn, if I get so close to my dream and I don't accomplish it, I'm going to be sick. I'm going to be sick forever too.
Mm-hmm.
But, I made right around 4:00, I made my way over. I walked from my college apartment to the football field. I bang on the gates. And I'm like, "Hey guys, what's going on? I'm here to practice, or I'm here to walk on." And they said, "Okay." So I go through all the tryouts, and there are a couple other kids there, and a couple of those kids, they became my closest friends on the team. But at that moment, I'm like, there's no way these kids are going to step in front of me. There's like that competitive edge stepped in. But yeah, I tried out. A few days later, they texted me and told me I made the team, and one of the most glorious and grateful moments of my entire life. And praise God for that.
What year was that when you made the team and when you walked on? What year was that?
That was 2018.
2018. So fall of 18.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's your height? Like, what size are you? What kind of player are we looking at? Because you play wide receiver, but what kind of player are we kind of looking at here? If I'm a coach and I'm watching you try out for USC, what am I looking at? What kind of player?
So I'm right now, I'm weighing in about 226, but I'm about 6'3", 226. And but when I walked on, I was about 210, but that's just because I shed a bunch of weight. Because I both my receiver coaches who I had worked with in San Diego while I was in junior college, they said, "Chris, you're playing tight end," and they were right. I played tight end my first year. They said, "There's no way in hell they're not playing you at tight end." And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, "Nah, man, I'm playing receiver." So right before I get on a meal plan, and I'm starting to shred like crazy. I'm right about 210 right when I walk on. Okay. But you lose weight throughout the season too. So I mean, I had good hands, so that was part of something that I'd always had ever since I was a little kid, just catching passes in front of the bed that my dad would throw to me, or in the front yard and all that kind of stuff. The stuff that dreams are made of, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, so the difference here is Rudy was like 5'4" and 150 pounds. If you ever watch the movie, you'll see like it was just improbable for him to even make the team, but he pushed his way through and he made it. Yeah. Your story is similar because you pushed your way through and made it, but you're 6'3", 220, 6'3", 210. That's a pretty good size for a wide receiver. I mean, that's a great size for a wide receiver on a big time college like USC. So you have some of the things going for you that maybe somebody like a Rudy didn't. But take me to that moment, the first time that you put the uniform on, because when you're a walk-on, correct me if I'm wrong, that doesn't necessarily mean you're dressing for every game. Maybe it does. But take me through what that was like putting on that uniform in that moment and finally getting there for that first time.
Clay Helton was our head coach. He said, if you want to suit up, you can. So I've known he wants everyone to suit up, but like you have to be you have to be hurt or you have to have some sort of excuse as to why you're not. I mean, I was never not going to suit up, but my first time walking into the Coliseum for people who don't know the colloquialism, but first time walking into the Collie, I got onto the grass and my eyes started kind of watering because I was just like, I made it. This happened. And Clay brought us into the center of the field and we said a prayer. We walked back up to the locker room and I get in there and I'm petrified that my name's not going to be on a locker. I'm terrified that my name's not going to be on a locker because I was thinking to myself, like, there's just no way that they would do me like that. But it was my first game as a Trojan. So I'm like, I also don't know how the system works. So I'm walking around, I'm looking, and then we go to this place called Walk-On Alley. So they have a bunch of the walk-ons in this little alley. And I look up and I see Chris Caulk, number 41. And I was just so unbelievably blessed to see that. I was like, ooh, let's go. And I was charged up, but put on all my stuff. And I thought it didn't dawn on me until like as I'm running out and running my routes in pregame, but I'm wearing a USC jersey. I'm wearing a USC helmet. I'm catching passes in the Coliseum, about 50, 60,000 people there. I'm like, whoa. Like,
it all just happened.
This is USC. Like, I'm here. So it was a surreal experience. I'll say that for sure.
Now, as a walk-on, there are no guarantees. Certainly, there's never a guarantee of any kind of scholarship. There's no guarantee of any playing time. You're kind of like that undrafted free agent in an NFL world, right? Where there's never guarantees and you have to really work your way towards it. But did you get in a game? And if you did, I want to hear that experience.
I didn't, but the thing is, I also have to consider who was ahead of me on that depth chart because I've been asked this before. Like, if you think about it, like guys who were ahead of me are Michael Pittman, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyler Vaughns, Devin Williams, Kyle Ford, Brew McCoy. And this isn't like I played Z, but everyone kind of plays everyone's positions in the offense. Everyone's kind of let me put it this way. Everybody knows each position. That's the way that they schemed it. So everybody can step in anywhere. But those kind of guys, like Devin's playing at Oregon right now. Michael's playing for the Colts and having an awesome season. Amon, I feel badly for Amon because he's with the Lions, but I'm happy and proud of the way he's played and that kind of stuff. But all these kids are 4 or 5-star kids coming out of high school, like super highly touted recruits. So I have to give myself a little bit of comfort, or a little bit of like buffer, but at the same point, like my competitive edge, I'm like, damn, I really wish I did get into a game. At the same point, I don't think it makes my story any better or worse because I didn't get in and for the last 30 seconds of a fourth quarter blowout against Arizona or something.
No, I mean that, and I should have probably prefaced by asking the question, because it doesn't make it any less amazing. That you're even on the team wearing a jersey, much less, if you get playing time. Like I said, nothing's promised as a walk-on, but nothing's promised at all in life. So the fact that you even were able to get there is a great story. As you make this team and as you put that uniform on and as you have that experience, what do you think God was teaching you and showing you through this journey to have that moment? And even today, like where you are now, because you're not playing anymore, obviously it's a couple years later. What do you think God has been teaching you and kind of showing you as you grow in your faith with him?
there's different stages of faith, and it's, everyone's faith kind of goes in different spots, but their journey is to a certain degree, obviously, it's the free will aspect, but God does order your steps when your heart's in the right place.
Yeah.
So, I would say at that point, there are a lot of lessons that I learned. I mean, at SC, I wrote down a whole bunch of them in my notes while I was there. So I would see certain things and they'd be so clear to me that, okay, this is definitely a lesson. One of them, I mean, look, I was so blessed to go to USC, but I really did learn about how important it is to be about how passionate about what you do. Like it is critical that you are it is imperative that you are super passionate about what you do. Because I love ball. Like I did love football, but I didn't love it to the point of like, okay, there's a lot of association of like, okay, I've got 6 a.m. weights and I've got to go to class. And I've got 4 hours of meetings and I've got this and that. But that kind of stuff didn't translate to where I'm like, okay, I really want to take where I am and get to where I need to go for the NFL. Granted, like I had a lot of room to get to, but I had made up a lot of ground from where I was to get to SC. So like nothing's ever out of the question. But at the same time, I was like, okay, I really, really realize how important it is to be super passionate and love what you do. There are a lot of lessons too. Like I would say that one's the most important though. But as far as faith would go, as far as a faithful lesson would be, you kind of gotta, I would go to this pastor in Studio City. His name's Pastor Josh LA. Knows the Bible very, very well. And I've met with him once about just kind of talked about my journey and everything like that. We talked about a lot of different things and kind of learned about how to live as a Christian, because that's a step in your faith journey that you do need to have. Yeah. There's a certain time where it might be arduous at certain points, but there are a lot of like thresholds that you need to be meeting as a believer and how to be living in your life as a Christian. I think those are the most important ones. And anybody listening who maybe sees that this is the step that they need to take, I would say that I would find a person or find a pastor or find a church or really look into it yourself about learning what it means to live as a Christian. I think that's one of the more important parts of your faith.
So what's next? So you have this story. I mean, maybe you write a book someday about it. Maybe there's another movie, another Rudy type movie that's done on the story of Chris Caulk, or speaking opportunities for you to share your story to people and encourage those young kids not to give up on their dreams. What's next? So
as far as the books or movies are concerned, I want to hit some more goals. So that way I have more to talk about. And believe me, those goals are in the process of being accomplished right now. But I'm working with a pretty awesome entertainment company. We haven't announced publicly or anything yet, but we have some really awesome property and awesome content on the way. And we've got some really awesome partners too. And that's what's next for me. That's going to be my next win. I can't talk a whole lot about it right now, only because if I did, I don't want anyone to get me in trouble because, as far as publicity goes, you don't want to announce anything before it's there. But no, I'm very, very blessed to have been afforded this opportunity. I'm very excited about it. And I know that, I'll tell you what, I've prayed a whole lot about it too. I mean, especially when it was either picking this or picking USC. So sticking around football or going this. And I feel like this is the way that God led me. And although there are ups and downs with it, like as with every other thing, and those downs aren't any easier when you get hit in the face. Like you have to recognize that there is a bigger picture that may not be easy to see in those certain times, but God always does kind of guide you out of it. And sometimes when those bad things happen, you're sitting there on the other side of the valley, and you're like, shoot, well, why did I even have any sort of doubt or any sort of like sadness or anything like that? But at the same time, there's a lot of things that are going on. I'm really excited about, and I can't wait to talk about them publicly.
That's fine. Okay. You can leave us hanging. That's called the cliffhanger. We'll have to find out, and you can follow Chris on Instagram, Chris Caulk, and follow his journey. See some cool pictures there that we'll have as well of him in that USC uniform, but following along and seeing what's next for Mr. Caulk. Listen, this is great. Thanks for reaching out, which is pretty cool that you did that. And thanks for being willing to share your story. I know it's going to encourage a lot of people. I hope a lot of little kids listen, because I think there's such a I mean, even for me, there was a desire at 7 or 8 to like dream big and go for the gold, if you will, and kind of chase after what you're passionate about. And then it kind of dies a little bit when you get to high school and you're like, all right, I guess I'll just get a job at this place. And it's like, no, keep going after your dreams and keep going after your passions. And eventually God will open up a door, the right door to where you need to go. And that's what your story reflects to me, as somebody who just kept going and didn't give up and got to fulfill a pretty cool dream. So Chris Caulk, thanks for being here, brother. Really appreciate you.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Super thankful for Chris Caulk to share his story here on Sports Spectrum. Give him a follow on Instagram. And I mean, not many people get to put on a USC football jersey and be a part of that storied franchise and that team for a year. And Chris Caulk got to do that and fulfill that dream of being a USC football player. Getting rejected 3 times. There's so many lessons in his journey. Continuing to fight, continuing to push forward, trusting that God has a plan, trusting that God wants to see your dreams and desires fulfilled, but sometimes it's just in a different way or in his timing and not ours. It's just so many good lessons and such an encouraging story, and grateful for Chris that he shared it here today on Sports Spectrum. We're grateful and thankful to you as well for being here on the show. Do us a favor before you say goodbye. Make sure you click that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. There's tons of stories, tons of content, tons of different guests that we've had on. The biggest names in sports and some names that you may not have heard of with amazing stories. That is what we do here at Sports Spectrum, bringing Jesus into the sports conversation. So we're grateful for Chris Caulk. We're grateful for you. Hopefully you'll tune in next time for another episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. We love you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.